Guys,
All right.
people out there.
Hey, everybody. All right, so we're going to talk about World of Motion because it is fun to be free. So hang with us here, and then as soon as we're done with this, we're going to wrap up and go to lunch. So lunch should start 11:20ish or so. We'll see how we do.
12:20.
12:20.
There you go.
All of this starts with the 1965 World's Fair, where there was a transportation pavilion. This is filmed from inside, where you would actually get inside of a real car and go inside of the ride, which was amazing. This was, of course, sponsored by Ford. And they really wanted to have Ford be the sponsor for this attraction because they had a long relationship with it. But then this guy shows up, and suddenly everything changes. Oh.
Here we go. Here we go.
Oh, you want to know what happened? Well, a few years before Disney fired me, which actually started with Spaceship Earth, my opinion, which was lucky I created the Gurr Design Company, and away we went. Anyway, at the Art Center College of Design in '76, the opening day, one of the people I had known, Bill Mitchell, Vice President of General Motors, I says, Bill, you ever heard of an Epcot? No, but I want to know now. So he gave me his card, mailing address. I went and talked to Marty Sklar the next day because we had 6 little boxes of presentation of Epcot sales brochures. And I says, Marty, here's Bill's address. Send them to him. And Marty blows up and he says, no, Gurr, you don't understand. Ford is our target company. I says, I promised the Vice President of General Motors you would send it. And Marty was furious for months. But within a couple of days, General Motors calls, and within a week, we had communications between General Motors and Disney like you couldn't believe. They'd fly out and talk to us. Even the chairman of the board, the crazy Roger Smith, came out and talked to Dick Nunes. We had conversations that were so deep, Marty just threw up his hands. Anyway, that got everything going. And then we finished up all the financials to tell General Motors we were going to have a major meeting on the top of the Contemporary Hotel. All the GM people were there, all the Disney people were there, and we make our giant pitch in the typical powerhouse Disney method. We addressed the guy who was CFO of General Motors, Tony DiLorenzo, typical big New Jersey crook-looking type of guy. And he listens to all our guys make this pitch, and he doesn't say anything, and all of a sudden he pulls out a calculator in his hand. He says, all these guests are coming. That's going to cost me 53 cents a person. What do I get for that? Our guys were speechless. We had never tried to sell to a guy that was a tough guy from New Jersey. But anyway, it worked. We made a pitch. This guy saw the whole thing and he looked at us as 53 cents a person, 10 years, all his money. And it worked well, and then within weeks, he says, okay, guess what? GE and everybody else jumped in. Nobody jumped in unless General Motors would jump in, and it all came down to Tony DiLorenzo. And the guy was so nice. I had to meet Club 33, my friend John McCormick, who was vice president of General Motors Europe, and there was a schedule problem with my flight. Tony says, Gurr, come with us back to Detroit on our brand new Gulfstream. Sign in as secret person number 13 in the back of the airplane. The pilot saw me go in there and he knew I liked planes. As soon as we took off, he says, come up in the front and you can ride with us. He knew what it was like to ride as an ex-person in the back end of their airplane. That's how friendship got started. Simple as that. We had a great time. Everybody signed up. You got a whole Epcot.
So GM is in,
Just like
and
that.
without Bob, there literally may not have ever been an Epcot Center because, as he said, signing GM was the tipping point to getting all of the other companies to sign on. So thank you, Bob, because we may not be here today without you for yet another reason. Claude Coates and Mark Davis were assigned to the original show, as they were many things. Of course, they worked on Haunted Mansion and Pirates together, so they put together the original version of the show that was going to run. And this is what it looked like. Here's like a 180 turnaround. You can see there's actually cars running on the outside because the inside was an Omnimover ride eventually. It started out mostly film, but they also wanted you to be able to get in a car and ride around, which sounds very familiar today, right? And there was all kinds of things in there. There was like a full-size space shuttle inside besides the Omnimovers, and it was really quite something. But it didn't quite have that Disney punch. It was good, but it wasn't great. And so someone called in this gentleman, Ward Kimball, to be sort of a third spoke of that wheel and bring in his stuff. Now, Ward was very uniquely qualified to run a transportation pavilion, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is he actually owned a train and a fire truck and a bunch of old cars. So he lived it. He understood this stuff. He actually bought that train and refurbished it himself with some friends of his. So he knew what he was doing as far as that went. He also hosted all kinds of really great shows on the Disneyland program. He actually wrote and produced the Man in Space series and the Mars ones. So he knew how to tell a historical story, and he knew a lot about transportation. So it seemed like a perfect match to get him involved with this, to kind of get it over the finish line. And Ward's going to explain what his philosophy is here of why the attraction turned out the way it was.
Approach this much the way I would do a film, a cartoon film or an animated film or a comedy. We take each serious episode in history of how man got around in these vehicles, and we'd say, what can we do to get a little chuckle or a slight whimsical laugh? And my training as a gag man in the early days of Disney's, where we used to be paid $5 for a gag and $10 for a really good gag, it developed all of us to think that way. So coming on the transportation ride problem, I applied the same rules. We weren't making a film necessarily, but the rules of entertainment and staging and developing a gag, the timing, were all the same. The main thing was to make this ride look authentic. All of the wagons, all of the props, as I said before, had to be right out of the history book. No cheating. The costumes had to be correct, the right period. And if our situation involved a little imagination or we'd go for a laugh, fine, but it had to look authentic.
So it was Ward and then Claude Coates and Mark Davis, and they all worked on it, and I'm sure a ton of other people also worked on it at the end as they got moved on and off the projects, but Ward was kind of the man in charge, and he gave us this pavilion, which we enjoyed for many years. And I just want to run really quickly through kind of some of the reasons that we love it. The vehicles inside. There were 16 cars, like GM cars, actually like all Buicks and things from their line, plus streetcars and steam cars and a full-size train. Well, yeah, a full-size train, plus the riverboat. So there's all kinds of vehicles inside, airplanes. There was a Pepper's Ghost effect, which I don't know how many people remember that at the end, but that was really cool. So that was a huge, obviously that was a Claude Coates thing because he was really great at that. There was 73 animals sculpted for this that were audio animatronic, plus 102 human characters, and Dave had to do all of them. He was the person that ended up animating every single one of those. We had Gary Owens, as the narrator,
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the wonderful world of motion.
who was known for laughing. And his whole deal is, if you go back and you listen to the dialogue, it's not funny. But the reason was he always played it straight, and then what you saw in the visual was kind of like in contrast to what he was saying. So the humor came from the difference between what he was saying, like how great everything was, versus Ward's setups, where you saw actually how like kind of awful and how funny things were. It also had speed rooms. There were 3 speed rooms in this attraction, including one that used graphics from Tron at the end. So that was really super cool. And that's what it sounded like. That sound carried with me, I think, for my entire life, of like hearing that. And of course, it had wonderful music from Buddy Baker and Existencio, who wrote the song, and then George Wilkins, who did the many, many, many variations of that. And of course, it ended up with this beautiful City of the Future that was keyed off of a painting done by Tib Delaney and then realized by Chris Runco from the effects department. And it had this awesome music that ran behind it. So I think that optimism that they talk about for the new ride, I hope is coming from this. Oh, that's interesting. All right. And just, this was a photo that Tom put out from Stephen Miller showing the inside of it, and just to get an understanding of the scale. Those are the cars that you rode in that you see in the upper back, and you're looking down into the floor. And look at that ladder. You can just see how big that final set was. It was amazing. And it was fun. That, I think, is the biggest thing. Spaceship Earth was very serious. Like the tone of most of the attractions was super serious, but this one was very Disney and very fun. And I think that's why a lot of us remember this very fondly. But this gentleman here, Dave Feiten, besides audio animatronic programming, you're also a wonderful model, right?
I guess so, yeah. Sorry, that's actually me posing as a character in American Adventure. Whenever they're doing background scenes, they needed somebody to model Sam McKinnon, Michael Lloyd, and some of the painters. So they would just grab somebody in the hallway, and they often grab me and say, here, put this costume on, go out in the parking lot, and here's a rifle, we'll tell you what to pose. And they did that a lot. I'm actually in 4 or 5 scenes in American Adventure. I'm a lot of the dead guys in the background. I don't know how that turned out, but yeah. And there's actually a museum near Wed, Cowboy Museum, that they put me in a giant painting that's scary because I think I'm 12 feet tall. But yeah, Ward Kimball was my director, and Mark Davis was kind of helping out too, but and Claude Coates. Ward was really a character, a really bizarre guy. I wasn't used to dealing with him because this was the first time. And he was always playing a joke on me every single day that he came in. And his biggest joke was he would have a real long tie that was like twice as long as a normal tie, unzip his zipper, run the tie through his zipper down to his knees. And he'd walk in pretending like there was nothing wrong, you know? And I go, Ward, I'm sorry, but you can't do that in here. He's like, you gotta pull your zipper up. It goes, Dave, that's the gag, come on, get the gag. But every scene was something new, something different, and there's always some type of gag in each scene.
Yeah. So here's the opening scene. We've got a picture of the actual ride plus the maquettes, and then these drawings. Did you ever get to work with these drawings?
They would bring the drawings in, they'd show me, but we saw the models, the miniature model first, and kind of went through that and get comfortable with it.
Yeah.
But whenever we mocked up a show, we mocked everything up at the Tunga building, which is right by the Burbank Airport. So you'd hear these giant planes landing and taking off right next to you every like 15 minutes. And it was really noisy when that happened. But they'd mock it all up, and we'd put everything up with tape on the floor and have blueprints to make sure that it was exactly in the right position, the right height. And then they'd mock up the characters on these wood platforms so that they'd be the correct eye height. And so you know exactly where the track was. They even have us, Waithel Rogers would have us put Dubutine around the base of the figure so it looked, first class. He didn't want, the VIP people coming in and seeing the valves and stuff underneath the figure. So we had to put Dubutine around, Dubutine in the background. Everything was lit up with, professional lighting, all with gels, all of it just at the Tunga building, just for a buy-off for the executives.
So we're going to step through kind of scene by scene, and as you see stuff, if you have a story behind it, throw it out there. This is trying out the animals, like all the different kinds of animals. So there's, zebras and oxen and elephants and all kinds of things. And the guy at the front was supposed to be a toll booth, like going into the city.
Yeah. Supposedly all of this was pre-programmed at the Hunger Building, but not everything. There's a few things that we missed or wasn't working right. But when we got there, I found out that Ward and Waithel Rogers and Ward Kimball and I guess Mark Davis probably, they changed a few things as for the setting, the positioning, because they were all about staging everything like really exactly so that it really played to the audience as you rode by. So the head had to look at the audience or play visually, make eye contact with them. Well, when I did it at the Tunga Building, I thought it was all right, but when you got there on the ride, you realize that a head is turned a little bit left or right or looking up too high, and you had to go back and reprogram all that. And somehow or another, during shipment, a lot of times, some of the functions broke down or the wire got pulled out or something happened during shipping that it broke the figures. So a lot of times things would had to be repaired. So you get to one scene, you get all done, and you think that it's all working, and you go to the next scene, and then something else would break down. You'd have to move all the equipment to the next scene, and so on. So you're constantly moving each day. But when we first went there, we didn't have a table or chair or anything to set the computer console on. The console cost $65,000, and the computer equipment, and it was really delicate. They didn't want anything to happen to it. But they didn't want to buy us a table or a chair. So they said, well, Dave, just find something. Waithel says, here, there's a steel drum over there, a trash can. Just set it on that. You can use that. And I go, oh, you got to be kidding me. So we roll over this trash can. I set it on top. So you can see the Anaconda in the picture there. And they're very heavy. We set it on top, and they would have me stand all day. And it was like 110 degrees inside that building because we had no air conditioning at that time in the middle of the summer, and I was just sweating constantly. And that's how we did it for a month, me just standing there trying to operate this. And then we'd have to roll that steel drum all the way down the track to the next set and reset it all up to the next figure. And finally, Eric Swap, who was my technical support person, just said, oh, screw this crap. And he just got in his car and left and went to Walmart, bought a folding table and a couple chairs, bought 2 tables, came back, and then we came into Waithel Rogers and Jack and slammed down the receipt, said, you're paying for this. And Waithel goes, oh yeah, why didn't you say so? Yeah, we'll cover that.
The building, you said, also notoriously had some residents that were there prior to you guys showing up.
When the Tunga building was first getting started, I was one of the very first people over there. And they asked me, since we were waiting for the figures to get built, and the first scene was actually this balloon scene, but they were mocking everything up, getting the bathrooms ready, getting the wood shop and all that. But there was only six of us over there, 6 people, and about 1,000 Black Widows. The whole building was just infested with Black Widows everywhere. And all 6 of us complained, but nobody would do anything. And I was working for Yale Gracie at the time, doing special effects. And they would have me mock up these 10 by 10 projectors of wheels for the World of Motion, these wheels rotating on the ceiling, and other stuff for Horizons and Spaceship Earth. And I had projectors everywhere in different scenes. There was Black Dubutine, but every time you reeled up an extension cord, there'd be a Black Widow every like 10 feet. And you'd flick it off, and another 10 feet, you flick off another one. And every now and then you'd step on one and go, oh, that wasn't me. You step on another one. Well, anyway, one day 2 of us got bit by black widows, and they kicked us all out, and they sprayed the place, and I guess we got rid of all of them. So, but I was always afraid of black widows ever since then. I was always looking for them in every project we worked on.
I want to show this. This is a wonderful scene and we have these great pictures of the figures up close. Now she had a couple of functions, right? So the foot tap,
Yeah.
right? And then probably an eye blink or something.
Yeah, it's very limited, yeah.
But even with that super limited motion, it really told the whole story just in a couple of things.
Yeah, they were really all about staging and getting all the staging just right. And Mark Davis was like amazing at it, and Ward was too. And it was like a huge deal. Then you didn't have to put all that money into the functions and have all these animated functions inside, because they cost thousands of dollars a piece. So that adds up really fast. So they tried to stage everything just right so that it just played as you went by and it read, because it had to read within a few seconds, because then you're on to the next scene. But sometimes when they went to put the figure in, there would be a steel bar that was part of the building itself, and they realized, oh my gosh, we can't put that here because there's a piece of steel holding up the building. We can't cut that steel. And so they would have to move the figure over a little bit, 6 inches or a couple feet, and that might throw everything off. So that was constantly a problem as you went through the building.
Here's a diagram, the construction drawing for the steam coach. It's just fascinating to me that they just went and built all this stuff in the shops there. Also, the steamboat built from scratch. And I always loved those silhouettes in the windows of the people to kind of give you an indication that something was going on. Some of them were static, and some of them were just animated, where they just turned to like give an indication that someone was dancing in there. Very cool. I love this picture of you and Ward. And I guess that you had some questions about some of the gags because it wasn't obvious to you as you were working on it.
Yeah, when we first mocked up the scene, actually that hat was just on his head. It didn't have the arrow in it, and the wardrobe people didn't understand that there was supposed to be an arrow going through it. And, or it was also be stuck into the stagecoach. But I argue with Ward, it's like, no, that's not it's just supposed to be on his head. He goes, no, Dave, that's the gag. I was like, you got to get the gag. So they changed the hat and put the arrow through it, and it was a different story afterwards. So I mocked it up wrong the first time. But.
And this is the train scene. Now, I know Mark Davis was unhappy with the way that this was staged, but it had to do with the amount of space that was in there, because it was a really tight little space. Just the fact that you could build any part of this, I think, was amazing. But you can see originally how it was staged so that way there were like basically 3 different groups going on. You had the guy at the front stopping the train with the guns, which was there, but very hard to see because there was kind of a rock in the way as you came through. So, and then you can see there were kind of like different sections with the people being held up sort of in the back of the train. But as they moved to the model, they realized that wasn't practical, and so stuff was kind of shifted around to tell that story a little bit better.
Yeah, we mocked this all up at the Tunga building, and they all were on these like wood boxes that they, tried to get the exact height. And I was really surprised how often they had to move everything. There you can see a sample of it. You see the wood box. And there we didn't have the train, so we had to like imagine exactly what the train was, and you'd have to mark everything with tape because the executives would want to know exactly where the car was as they came to inspect everything and try and visualize it. But I really thought I could really animate and really move this. I thought I had the ability, especially with the hero guy in the white outfit with the sheriff's badge on. But when I got all done, Wathel says, no, tone it down. That's too fast, it'll break apart. It won't be able to stand up to all that movement. So they had me reanimate it and run it a little bit slower, which is kind of sad, but I really want to put a lot of motion and make it a little more violent.
This is the bicycle scene. And this had a lot of interesting stuff. It had sort of, I love the way that they staged the unicyclist to be able to look like he was going back and forth, which that was a really neat effect. And then, of course, all the things like the people falling in the mud and the, I think we have a close, no, we don't have a close for that. Then this, as we move on to, here's you programming the car, which had a lot of fun things. So not only were you animating the figure there, you animated the car as well, right?
Yeah, just, well, all of it, the whole show.
Right.
But yeah, it's weird as when you're working on this, is that the construction is going on at the same time. And you have all these big, burly construction guys coming through, and they want a free show. And they'll just walk up to you and say, hey, I hear you're running that figure. He's like, can we have a free show today? You know, it's like, oh, leave me alone, you know, come on, you know, like, I'm trying to work here. It's like, hey, I bet you if I give you $10, you'll run it. It's like, no, go away. And so finally I would run it, and he would see it, and he'd be real happy, he'd leave. He'd come back with 10 more people. It's like, the rest of us want to see the free show, you know, and that would go on all day long. You'd get, every now and then you'd get, you know, half hour, you'd get 10 more people. And it was constantly a problem. So eventually we switched to night shift, where all the construction workers were gone. And we had to do it that way. That was the only way to get rid of the construction workers.
Tad was going to talk about this. He got to work on this little bit with, oh my gosh, the name is the sculptor, Blaine Gibson. And you know, Blaine always followed whatever Mark Davis wanted. He was, you know, Mark was very specific. I want this, it needs to look like this, it needs to be exactly like this. And if you deviated from that, that was an issue, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Blaine was really good sculptor. I mean, all the time I would like sneak into his office and just like look around and look at all this sculpting that he did. I was just so amazed. I was like, how can this guy be this talented? It was like amazing, you know?
So when Tad was charged with doing a little bit of work on this scene, he made some suggestions about the expression on this particular figure's face. But Tad said that he was used to coming from animation where things were very collaborative. It wasn't a, oh, hey, you do this exactly like this. It's, I give you something, and then you plus it, and we pass it back and forth, and we get there. And Blaine came to him after this was over and thanked him for giving him the latitude to actually do a little something of his own and to be able to add on something to it. So the expressions on a lot of the faces in this are pushed a little bit farther, you know, not quite caricature, but you can definitely get that read within 1 or 2 seconds of exactly what they're feeling. These figures are very compatible with Pirates figures, which is why there were a ton of Pirates figures in here. But you can see the expression on this guy's face is a little bit beyond what they had done previously. So that was, I think, a really neat story.
Whenever they could, they actually used some of the pirate heads and just redid them and put a mustache or a different wig or something on it, or the same body parts, rather than re-sculpt and remake a whole figure. They just, oh, let's use that body part from that pirate and put it on this character in World of Motion. So that happened a lot.
And then even within the attraction itself, it's like that same face gets used, I think, 3 or 4 times on different figures throughout it.
Yeah.
This is a setup for the big city scene. These are the sketches, as we heard earlier. Things start with sketch and then they move to model. So these are the sketches that Mark Davis did for the different sections of that big city scene. And then those were taken and then moved into the model form. And this is one of the things that I thought was really interesting. So on this staging, you can see initially this is staged completely differently. In the final, this truck is over down here. You can actually see there's some forced perspective going on back here, and it looks like there's an L train up here and a little car back here to kind of give you a feeling of depth. And the gag is actually that this car has run into a vendor with just like a push cart. The horse is back here behind it. And so everything's a little bit different. And then when we move to the model stage down here, you can see it's arranged more into the format that we're familiar with now. And I guess the indication of the L train is up here instead of over there. So as you were talking about, the staging was really important to them. They wanted to make sure that everything read properly. I just thought that that was fascinating, that those changes were happening during the development of the attraction. Here it is in Tunga, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the full-scale building being built in the back and the model sitting in the front for them to reference as they're working on the construction of that.
And all that got shipped over?
Yeah,
Oh my
right?
gosh.
So you build it, break it all down, put it on trucks and send it to Florida, and then build it all back up again.
I can't remember if this was the scene, but I think it was. We had a fire actually behind that where we had a projector that actually was too close to a curtain and actually caught on fire. It almost burned the whole set down. And I remember that happening, and Matt Purdy was like screaming at me to get out of the building. Everyone get out, get out. And they called the fire department, and everyone's running there. I was actually trying to put it out with a fire extinguisher, and he just, no, get out of here. We don't want you to die, But I said, don't worry about it. It's like the Black Widows will get it.
So here's some close-ups in there, and there's Ward, pretending to adjust some chickens probably. I'm sure he wasn't moving the chickens around.
Yeah, the chickens are right out of Pirates of the Caribbean, by the way, and they're the easiest things to program. You just two functions, just kind of close your eyes and go like this, and it's like, oh, they're all done.
And those are the chickens that ended up in tons of other attractions too. Is that correct, JT? Is that right? They're on the.
Oh gosh, where, Living with the Land? Is that?
Well, they ended up, I think, on thank you, the Barnstormer.
Yeah.
So those chickens had a long life after World of
I think the chickens were union because they seem to get in every show.
And here's just an overview of some of the things that Dave got to program on World of Motion.
Yeah, I had a fun time, pulling that donkey, and then Waithel goes, oh my God, you're gonna rip that donkey's head off, tone it down. Come on. It's like it'll never last. These have to last, 7 days a week, 16 hours a day. And I go, okay, Waithel, come on, all right.
Did it all work all the time for a long period of time, or was it what was the length of this?
These are 1 minute cycles, and you program for 1 minute, it just repeats every minute. So you had to make sure that everything lined up at the end of 1 minute was the same as 0, 0. So the same thing as on Pirates of the Caribbean, it just runs this 1 minute cycle over and over.
Say you have the whole 20 things going on. Did 20 things always work for years and years, or was it?
Some things broke down the next day, and some things lasted fine, and that's where it goes back to the whole thing with Waithel Rogers always getting me to tone it down, because there was a problem with MAPO or the guys at Disney World that did the maintenance, and I heard this story a lot, but it's probably true, but they would come in after I leave, after the show opens, and tune everything down so that it would last longer, because they didn't want to have to fix it. And it's something called a gain, and as you turn the gain down, it doesn't go quite as fast. But there's also a stroke and offset, which is the 0 point of the arm or the other end of the arm. You can actually pull it off to that stop, so it uses less range. But that changes my animation dramatically. And you can see that in American Adventure if you go in there, and you can see where hands don't shake, or they don't go to the right position, or hold the cigar up to its mouth, Mark Twain, or if you're slightly off. That's because those guys didn't set the card exactly right. And so now the animation doesn't play exactly the same. And the same thing with World of Motion. The cards had to be tuned exactly right. So a lot of the time was just trying to tune and adjust those cards so that every function worked properly.
And here we are into the barnstorming section, and I always loved that cop behind the billboard to pull you over as you were driving by. That was fun.
Yeah, that was a fun character. Oh my gosh.
And then at the end, the cars, and I know you have a great story about
So I'll probably go to Disney jail for this, but if you look at that last car, the station wagon, which kind of reminds me of my brothers and our family loading up in the station wagon when I was a little kid, but we're getting almost all done with everything, and we've gone through every attraction. I think we had this last scene here to do, and because we switched to night shift, we wanted to do that, get away from the construction workers, but what happened at night shift is the operators, ride operators, they wanted to run the ride and do all their testing and, turn it on and off and pretend loading people on. So we had to work around them while the vehicles were moving. But right now, at this time, the vehicles had stopped, they're on their break or something, and so we decided to move our equipment. We moved the equipment to this last scene here. On our cheap little Walmart table, folding table. We set it on top of that, the Anacon, and went back to get some cables and a couple little things. And as we're just heading back, all of a sudden we hear on the intercom, okay, the ride system will now start immediately. And the ride system turns on and we go, oh, wait a second, you're supposed to give us 3 warnings. Well, they didn't give us 3 warnings, These were new ride operators. They didn't know what the rules were. And the vehicle starts up, and it catches the very corner of the table, just nicks it. We didn't put it quite right. Grabs the table and Anacon, slides it down into the track, and the whole track system starts chewing up all the knobs and buttons off the Anacon, rips them all off, and chews up all the extension cords and everything, and it just destroyed it. So anyway, we were done for that night. We got to go home early, like at 1 in the morning. So then I had to go to Jack Taylor's trailer in Waithel Rogers and tell him, we destroyed the Anacon. And I go, well, am I fired? He goes, hell no, you got other work to do. Get back to work tomorrow. It's like, we'll get you another Anacon, tomorrow. So they flew another Anacon down. So.
And recently at the last D23, they announced that the new version that's going in is going to look back at World of Motion and hopefully key off of this. So I'm fascinated, as I'm sure you are all, of what that means for the future, because this really was a wonderful attraction. And I want to deviate here for a second, because as we were getting set up and talking, and I've heard this from several of the Imagineers as we were prepping for the show, just how different WED was of a place to work and how fantastic it was and how really family-like it was at the time. And you shared these photos of a cookie contest that you set up, right, and run
Yeah,
there.
for some reason, I guess I had an imagination, or I thought maybe I was hungry, I don't know. But I said, hey, let's have a cookie contest. And everybody liked the idea, and so I put it together here with, you can see a bunch of people in that lower left picture. And it turned out to be a huge ordeal at WED. And everyone got into it, and there's a Big Owl cookie, and there's all kinds of bizarre cookies, but even the special effects department, Bill Novi, they made this dome with all these effects inside and lights and motors and all kinds of stuff. They went way overboard. It's like you could have put it in Epcot the next day as an attraction. But anyway, everyone ate the cookies afterwards. They liked it, and they had Cookie Monsters as the prizes given away. And you can see the people at the top who all won a prize. Bill Novi's the first person. But I'd like to tell you one other story before I forget, is that I did not light the porta potties on fire. That was not me. Okay. I'll tell you a little story about American Adventure, and this happened in World of Motion. A lot of the rides, every now and then somebody would light a porta potty on fire, and it was always usually at lunchtime, and they emit a lot of black smoke, a huge flame, just horrible fire. But that way they got new porta potties the next day, And the construction workers, I'm pretty sure, were doing it, not the Disney employees. The Disney employees would never do such a thing, I think. So one day at American Adventure, we wanted to go out at lunchtime and just kind of get out of the sun because it was really cold air conditioning. We're having our lunch, we're laying outside, and we're kind of just watching the construction. And there's this guy that works with us. I won't give his name because he'll probably get mad at me, but we'll just call him Melvin. So Melvin goes to use a porta potty in the row of 10 right in the middle, and we don't think anything of it. And all of a sudden, the porta potty next to his is on fire. We start yelling at Melvin to come out. And then the porta potty on the other side of him is on fire. So now there's two of them on fire, and the middle one is Melvin's. And poor Melvin's still in there, and we're screaming and yelling. Everyone's yelling at me. Suddenly, Melvin, the door opens up. He runs out. His pants are all the way down to his ankles. He's tripping and falling, and we're rolling over laughing. And he goes, I don't think that was funny. So, anyway, I didn't light those porta potties on fire. That wasn't me.
Well, thank you, Dave, for sharing your time with us and these awesome stories. And with that, it's lunchtime. So everybody go get some lunch.